That's absolutely right, Ed. And
all right, well, let's go kill them right now.
No, not that they have to die off, but that the makeup of the leadership is not representative. I think the other group that hasn't been talked about today that I wanted to bring up is probably the most underrepresented in newsrooms and an invisible population are Muslim Americans. And if you look at the survey, I think in general the respondents felt that that the coverage of the campaign, though flawed, did advance race relations. They were kind of 50-50 on gender and then very, very down on religion. And you wonder, why did people feel like the coverage of religion or religious groups get so shortchanged in this? And I think one of the examples is that the media really missed a major aspect of, for example, the whole is Barack Obama Muslim controversy. And, we went to the madrasa in Indonesia to see if they were training terrorists, and we looked at the garb that he was wearing on Drudge Report and tried to read into what that meant about him. And I think the story that we missed was, and I know I keep making pop culture references, but the Seinfeld episode where they keep saying, not that there's anything wrong with that. And that's sort of what I wanted people to say. Why has becoming Muslim in this day and age become this liability where it's the equivalent of having a nanny gate or the equivalent of having something that would completely damage your campaign? And how did the Obama campaign handle this? I think that was a story that was really missed, and I think that is a direct product of the lack of representation of people who speak for that population, have had the experience of being part of that population in media leadership and among reporters.
Anybody? Jump in. If you don't have a follow-up, then, Matt, let me ask you, was there a push, no names, but was there a push to be careful with how a story was crafted? Was it looked at even more carefully because you had a female with Mrs. Clinton, because you had an African-American? Was there a heightened sense of sensitivity in terms of how editors were looking at what was reported?
Well, I think with a lot of these issues, part of the problem is that there isn't a lot of talk in the newsroom about these issues and about how they are to be covered. And I think that kind of leads into a lot of the problems where, things don't come up in stories, things don't get covered perhaps as much to the depth as they should. And I think part of it, too, is not just that people are uncomfortable about racial issues, but also that, as several people have said, these are very nuanced issues. They're very complex. And a lot of us in the mainstream media don't do nuance very well. And so that's one of those kind of fundamental failings that really reaches into this area very well. And I think another interesting thing that I saw during the campaign was that, for example, when I was doing my writing about the campaign, I made a point of talking to diverse sources, and not just the same old white guys, but people that gave kind of a broader spectrum of opinion and insight into things. But when you're writing for the newspaper, unless you have a headshot of somebody next to the story, you're not necessarily knowing that that this person is an African American, that this person is Asian American, or what. So it's kind of odd that there's a kind of stealth diversity when you're writing for a newspaper versus doing a broadcast.
Clarence, do you believe that most of this is benign neglect in terms of how things are covered? It isn't kind of in the back room, forget those people, it's just not on the radar screen, or just as I believe Leslie suggested, the idea that it's not what I grew up with, it's not what I'm used to, so I'm just following what is my everyday occurrence.
Yeah, there was a lot of that and other pathologies of the press. Like we're a daily business. Every day we come in, it's a different day. And whatever is the top news of that day, we focus on that. And then we forget about it after the deadline is passed, and we worry about the next day. It's a great business, by the way, for people like me who have ADD. I I thought it might be adult onset. I was probably born with it, didn't know it because they weren't diagnosing it in my day. But this also helps to explain why traditionally so many newsroom employees were known for self-medicating themselves by various means. But that's a subject for another day at the National Press Club. There was one thing in connection with that I meant to mention earlier as I was rambling along trying to remember, and that was following up on what Amy had said about the Philadelphia speech. I want to put in a good word for that speech. I thought it was very important, and the fact that it's one thing to say it wasn't news. You're right, it wasn't news, but it was nuance, and that was what was key. To put that into its context, that whole campaign up until that point had been like a Seinfeld joke in terms of the race being that big, dare I say it, gorilla in the corner. If I can say that, now I'm probably going to get in trouble. But it was standing over there in the corner saying, I'm just waiting for you to bring me up. Because everybody was avoiding it, except in a real nice sense. Isn't it wonderful that biracial candidate won Iowa, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't until Reverend Wright, bless his heart, hit YouTube, not the front pages, hit YouTube, and people could tune in. Then all of a sudden, race was there, blam, because it wasn't race, ladies and gentlemen. It was that people are nervous about an angry black guy.